Hey, Shalom Akim, Shalom, Shalom, giving all praises, glory and honor to Yahweh, Ba'ashim Yahushai, Ba'ashim Rakakwadash, double honors to the apostles and the elders, great millstone, for teachers his truth and salutations to the sincere Akim and Akwatham. Listen, may the blessing of election be upon your house. My name is Raquai. I'm back in here with another quick on Lord's will, as always, an edifying lesson. And for today's lesson, I wanted to read through this article that I found on theguardian.com, and it says here, it says nutrients in our food are declining, and it says, can regenerative agriculture save it? And this is I thought this would be a very interesting article to go into, because we always talk about how everything is kind of polluted. The air is polluted, the water is polluted, the food is polluted from the perspective of when you go into like pesticides and insecticides and so on and so forth, and things that are being basically it's tampered with. But even before you get to that step, our food is also being tampered with through the soil, because the soil doesn't actually have the important nutrients it needs to actually be able to nurture those good crops. Kind of like a woman, when you think about a woman's womb, if a woman wasn't eating the right food, then that baby that she's carrying in her womb is not going to receive the proper nutrition. So what do you end up with? You end up with children that has malnourishments. They're not properly, I should say, I'm sorry, properly nourished, so you end up with a weak born baby, right? So I wanted to read through this, and again, hopefully, this lesson, will be edifying here. So it's dated Friday the 24th of July, and it says of this year, and it says for the last few decades, the nutrient content of our crops has been declining. It says in the late 90s, the U.S. Department of Agriculture found that the vitamin C content of lemons has decreased by almost a third over the past 22 years. It says calcium in carrots are important, and especially for non-meat eaters, it says it has reduced on average by more than a quarter. Vitamin A in bananas was down 57%, and the mineral content of wheat has declined by 20 to 30% in the 1960s, right? As a matter of fact, since it mentioned wheat, I want to grab this precept in the Apocrypha. Just give me 1 second. Let me just find it. Because these are all principal things. These are all important things, because when you look at, how we lived in the ancient times, we lived off the land. We didn't have fridges, we didn't have stoves, we had cattle, sheep, goats, but, you might have had, for example, like there's this Israelite that's mentioned in the book of Kings that had a vineyard that was well coveted by the king Ahab, right? That was something that was within your family. So, just to show and understand that, we had abundance when we went actually into the land and we settled there. You understand what I'm saying? Like when you read about the book of Joshua, we went into the land, and then we actually, the different tribes received their different portions of that land, right? Levites received the cities, so on and so forth. But the point is, that was the way we lived. It's just that the land is not properly, taken care of. So what happens is, the people suffer. That's why, the scriptures talk about how when the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice. But when the wicked beareth rule, the people essentially they mourn. So that's actually not the precept I wanted to get, but give me 1 second. Let me look for it. Let me, one second. Since it mentioned wheat, it says here, this is Sirach 39, verse 26. Excuse me. And it says, the principal things for the whole use of man's life are water, fire, iron, and salt. It says flour of wheat, honey, milk, and the blood of the grape, and oil, and clothing. So all these things are important uses. You need these things to actually be able to perform your day to day. Your body needs all these things. You understand what I'm saying? So it mentions here flour of the wheat. So even that in itself has been tampered as well, because like when you look at certain brands, it might say like refined, you know what I'm saying, which is like a strange play on words, because refined basically means that when you go into that, re means back and fine means pure, so it's back to a pure estate. But the pure estate of how flour is supposed to be is essentially the whole wheat. And what Esau has done, he has tampered with that. So for example, when you go into the anatomy or the parts of a grain, I'll just use the wheat as an example. You have three different parts, right? You have the endosperm, you have the germ, and then you have the bran. So I'm gonna pull this up real quick before I continue. Just bear with me. Let me just pull this up real quick, just for more understanding of what Esau has done. Okay, so the bran is the outside portion where you get that's your outside layer that protects the seed and consists of high fiber, B vitamins, and some protein and some trace minerals. Your endosperm is where you have it contains the bulk of the wheat to the kernel, and it makes up mostly of starchy carbohydrates and some protein. And your germ is the core of the seed where growth occurs, so it's rich with healthy omega-3 and 6 fats, vitamin E, B vitamins, phytochemicals, and antioxidants. So this is the whole grain, like when you see something that says whole wheat, right? However, when you look at, just give me 1 second. When you look at the refined grain versus the whole grain, the refined grain primarily has the endosperm that has the carbohydrates. You know what I'm saying? So this is why a lot of people, they associate carbohydrates as bad because of a lot of the foods that they choose, right? But Esau has also a hand in this because he has stripped away the bran and the germ, where you actually get your fiber, you get your minerals, you get your fatty acids. So a lot of people eat, they primarily get a lot of what's it called, carbohydrates, right? So this is another way how, as the scriptures talk about, how our food will be defiled amongst the Gentiles. You understand what I'm saying? How an unwise king, basically, as the scriptures say as well, an unwise king will destroyeth his people, because he's not making sure his subjects are being fed properly. So let me go back to the article and then I'll continue here. Where is it? Okay, so it says here a number of reasons have been suggested for this worrying decline, ranging from the varieties of crop that are bred to grow quicker and bigger to the higher carbon dioxide levels in the air, causing plants to reproduce more sugars, starches. They grow faster, but they produce fewer nutrients. So essentially, They grow much. So it's all about, basically it's all about convenience, right? It says wide ranges of fixes have been suggested. It says from GM crops to synthetic soil, amendments to underground farms. So it says one group of agricultural researchers, however, argues that the answer to declining nutrients may be more straightforward than that. Regenerative agriculture, really the answer is really to understand the Lord's way, and understand that, as the scriptures say as well, the Lord's way is higher than our ways, right? Because they have it in their mind, they think they're smarter than the Most High. And when you buy a lot of food today, a lot of our food is missing the seeds, right? So I wanted to get this here. And the seeds are very important because that actually is important for proper nutrients. Like for myself, for example, I use myself as an example. I like a lot of pumpkin seeds, right? Because you get the abundance of magnesium and zinc. It cleanses, it helps to cleanse the body from parasites. It's such a multi purposeful seed that I normally just use in my diet. I'll hit you with another one real quick. There was something I read. I'd recently just started using flax seeds myself. I've been using it quite a long time, for I would say maybe about a month and a half now. And I remember reading something about there was a king named King Charlemagne, which I believe he's a Jake, that ruled during the Dark Ages, right? And he made sure that his subjects ate flaxseed, right? And flax is normally used to make fabrics such as linen, right? So this is that he is an example, like he's an example of what you would call like a wise king. You understand what I'm saying? Like, but when it comes to Esau is, the scriptures say the soul that's within him is not upright. So this is what he does, and this is how his rulership affects the quality of the food, which in turn affects the quality of the people. So here it says, Genesis 1 verse 29, and it says, and the Elohim said, behold, I have given you every herb bearing seed. It says, which is upon the face of the earth, and every tree, and in which is the fruit of the tree, yielding seed, to you it shall be for meat. And meat doesn't always refer to, like, when people see like meat in the scriptures, they think of like a piece of steak or something like that, right? When you see meat, like a good example is in the laws on warfare. There are certain trees that you wouldn't cut down because it can serve as meat, right? Because certain trees, it bears fruit. So there are certain trees, that you're in your environment that actually has fruit on them, right? So let's go back, and this is one of the things as well, why there is a nutrient decline, which eventually affects the cattle, which affects, livestock, which affects the people. Because, if the cattle are not getting the nutrients they need, when you slaughter that cattle, that cow, that sheep, that goat, whatever it is, then that sheep, whatever it is, you don't get the necessary nutrients, because now your cattle, that livestock, was poorly fed. So continuing on, this article is quite long, so I'm just going to kind of hit some key points. Okay, so this is where it starts to go into like the fertilizers and the soil. And it says, the way soil is treated by modern farming may be part of the problem, and that's true. It says plowing, the use of chemicals, fertilizers, herbicides, pesticides, disturb even the soils, and even destroy the soil's mycorrhizal networks, which are not only just coming to understand, but allow plants to pull nutrients from the earth. Whoa, let me Google that 1 second. I actually didn't know that. Let me just look that up just for edification. I actually didn't know what that is. So it says mycorrhizal networks are underground webs formed by fungal threads. It says joining with plant roots, trading soil minerals for plant sugars. It says, though recent scientific debates whether these are linked actively share resources or intelligence between mature trees. Okay, so there's basically kind of like networks of they look like roots, right? And it's basically shared by other plants that's within the vicinity, right? So this is one of the ways that that network that's underneath is how plants are able to draw in nutrients from the soil. So now you're starting to see the what's it called, the connection between how the plants receive their nutrients from the soil. So essentially how we treat the soil is how it affects the quality of our food. And Esau is such a base man, he doesn't understand that. So it says this is a geologist. His name is Dr. David Montgomery, a geologist and a co-author of the book of What Your Food Ate, says that we need regenerative agriculture to right the wrongs of degenerative farming that helped sustain a post-war population boom but wrecked soil health in the process. It says other studies support these findings. So it says, for example, a large literature review by Newcastle University in 2015 found that a switching to eating organic fruit and vegetable cereals and food made from them would provide additional antioxidants equivalent to eating 1 or 2 extra portions of fruit and vegetables a day, right? Let me skip that. Let's go down here. As a matter of fact, let's go to Leviticus, because they mentioned the soil. Because the Heavenly Father, he had this in, this is much ingrained within our culture, because how we treat the land eventually affects us as a people, what's that? Leviticus 25. 1 second. Let's see here. This is Leviticus 25, verse 1, and it says, And the Lord Yahweh spake unto Moses at Mount Sinai, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them, When ye come into the land which I give you, then shall the land keep a Sabbath unto the Lord. 6 years thou shalt sow thy field, and 6 years thou shalt prune thy vineyard, and gather the fruit thereof. Verse 4, But in the 7th year shall be a Sabbath of rest unto the land, a Sabbath for the Lord. Thou shalt not sow thy field, Salakia, and nor prune thy vineyard, right? So, verse 5, I'll read it here. That which groweth of its own accord of thy harvest thou shalt not reap, neither gather the grapes of the vine undressed, for it is a year of rest unto the land. So basically, you're supposed to let the land, you reap the benefits for this many years, and on the 7th year you let it, you let the land chill, you let it rest, you let it recharge, you let it recuperate. In agriculture, that is known as land fallowing. Because you understand that the land needs to basically recharge. What Esau does, because he's such a complete moron, what he does is overfarm the land, kind of like how he overworks the people. You give them, you have this thing of overtime, you're doing overtime and all that kind of stuff, time and a half, right? he does the same thing with the land. He overfarms the land, and what happens is you end up with below mediocre soil quality when you do that. Because you're not allowing the land to recharge and rest. The soil needs proper nutrients. It needs the important nutrients, for example, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. So when he doesn't do the right thing, he goes and he buys a synthetic, what's it called? Those synthetic fertilizers, right? So when you buy that, and eventually when the land doesn't need that anymore, then that nutrient runoff ends up spilling into bodies of water, and then that creates another problem known as eutrophication, where you see, if you ever go by a lake, and then you see like all these massive like algae blooms where it's like really green on top. That's a disturbance in that ecosystem. If you look that up, it's called eutrophication. And then that it starts to affect that particular ecosystem on top, right? Because what that does, it blocks a lot of the sunlight, right? So it affects a lot of the wildlife that's underneath, right? So you see how keeping the Lord's way is really, really important, and how all these systems are basically kind of like interconnected. So Esau is such a base man, he doesn't understand the value in actually adhering to the Lord's way, right? So this is why the creatures, the trees, the people are in constant mourning. Let me get that in Isaiah, 1 second. This is why the people languish. Let's see, Isaiah 24. This is Isaiah 24, verse 4. And it says, the earth mourneth and fadeth away, the world languisheth and fadeth away. The haughty people of the earth do languish. The earth is also defiled by the inhabitants thereof, because they have transgressed the laws, changed the ordinance, and broken the everlasting covenant. So Esau doesn't keep the ways of the Lord. He doesn't actually maintain the last Sabbath. And this is what happens. This is the consequences thereof. The scriptures say, woe unto the land when a king is a child, because a child is only about making sure they only care about themselves. They don't care about the responsibility of actually to maintain something. They only care about, okay, being fed, and children need to be watched, right? Let me get that. In Ecclesiastes, where is that? 1 second. Ecclesiastes. This is Ecclesiastes 10 and 16, and it says, woe unto thee, O land, when the king is a child, and the princes eat in the morning. It says, blessed are thou, O land, when the king is the son of nobles. So he's properly instructed. Understand? Like you see, a good example of that is I believe it was Josiah, right? That was properly, when he was 8 years old, and then they found the books of the law, right? And then he began, to actually make all these different reformations, and began to actually take away a lot of the different shrines. He basically began to do like a major reformation process, right? As opposed to, when you have a king that just behaves like a child, and it's all about me, and you don't care about the welfare of the people. You don't care about the welfare of your princes. You don't care about the welfare of your servants, your subjects. You understand what I'm saying? So this is what happens when Esau is he's hoarding up resources, and then you don't care about the actual major resource. You don't care about the welfare of the earth. So let me see if there's any more here. It says regenerative culture agriculture has plenty of critics. It says it is much less reliant on mechanization and agriculture and agrochemicals, and can require more human labor. Therefore, it is often considered less cost effective. It is also susceptible to greenwashing, increasing prevalent. Studies have shown in the context of nutrition. Medical professionals say that they already have enough challenging getting their patients to eat enough fruit and vegetables without extra cost, right? Let's see what greenwashing is, just for edification. In the kingdom, the nations are going to actually learn righteousness, and part of that righteousness is actually knowing the dietary law, right? So, this is greenwashing is a deceptive marketing practice used by companies to make their products, activities, and policies appear more environmentally friendly when they are not. So it says in using vague terms such as eco-friendly, natural, green, right? So it's something that might appear so-called green, like it's helping the environment, but sometimes that's not necessarily the case, right? Scriptures say his words are softer than oil, but it's drawing swords. So sometimes it plays on how something might look, the appearance of things. But a lot of the foods that we might buy and thinking like, okay, this product is eco-friendly, or this product is green, or as another thing I saw, like for example, like bananas. I've noticed in the store you might see bananas, like the regular bananas, and then you see organic bananas, which is probably like, I think it's like 99 cents per pound, right? So you see the one that's 59 cents and 99 cents, right? But like, why is the other one not organic, so to speak, right? So what I'm saying? I'm just using that as an example to kind of add to this point of so-called greenwashing. So I guess I'll just finish off. As a matter of fact, let me go to Matthew. Let me finish off this, because if that's this is why, Yahushua has to intervene at some point, because, there is no flesh. Matthew 24. This is Matthew 24 and 22, and it says, and Yahushua speaking, except those days be shortened, there shall no flesh be saved, but for the elect's sake, those days shall be shortened, right? So, this is why the Lord has to shorten it. This is another reason out of many why the Lord has to shorten the days, because this environment is becoming a lot more inhabitable. Yes, we do the best that we can. Yes, scriptures do say bodily exercise profited little, to take care of your temple, praying and fasting and so on and so forth. But, at the same time, we need divine intervention out of this hell, because this is not the way to treat the earth. This is just bad earthly management. This is bad management. So what happens when you have bad management? All the subjects underneath suffers. So that's pretty much the point. I just wanted to read. This is another fascinating take on what's going on in terms of the quality of the food, and why food as well has to be properly grown properly, because we get the maybe the best of the worst, right? And we actually, I haven't actually drank or ate something and reaped the full benefits of wheat or grapes or any fruit that you can think of, right? Because as much as it feels good to eat a lot of these foods, you don't get the fullness, because it lacks the nutrients, because it's not being cultivated properly. So that's pretty much the point. But Lord's will, this lesson was quick and edifying. Just like to give all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh Bashim Yahushai. Until next time, I say Shalom.